So we come to our last presentation. Do we say, as they say, we save the best for last? Sebastian, if we can bring Sebastian on, I think he's on. We can bring him on and we get started. I know Sebastian has a lot to talk about today and show you guys, so we're going to try to give him an extra few minutes to jump on a little bit earlier if we can. So we're just going to bring him up here. And as we're bringing him up, Sebastian, again, I saw Sebastian speak at the Oregon AI conference and ended up actually was able to take one of his workshops as well, building workflows. And I have to say, I failed. Good teacher, bad student. I didn't build it. My workflow broke. I couldn't get it to work.
Oh,
Sebastian, how's it going? Thank you for joining me.
I'm yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. And it's been also a pleasure hearing all the other speakers today. This is a really great lineup.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So, as I mentioned, I met Sebastian in Oregon at an event, and we've stayed connected. And doing his agency's doing some brilliant work in the workflow space and building chatbots and a whole bunch of other stuff. He's really is a lifelong passion for AI. And if you follow him on LinkedIn, you see sort of some amazing things that I see some of the workflow he's built, and it's like there's things all over the place. It's pretty amazing. So I'm excited to see what you're going to share today. But I'm curious, actually, Sebastian, and you're working with businesses building these, like you're building these automations and so forth. And what are you feeling? What are you hearing? Like, are people super excited, or they're still nervous, or once you build these workflow, they're like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this months ago? Like, what are you hearing from them?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. And I think right now the biggest thing I still see is that there's such a different level of understanding of what's possible.
Right.
And people are generally hesitant to be either using certain tools or doing certain workflows. And so a lot of what I've been doing over for this year, let's say,
Yeah.
has been just trying to understand where people's levels are and trying to just do education as well to make it clear what is even possible because
Right.
things are also moving really fast as well. And but yeah, the one thing that I noticed or learned at the Oregon conference where we met was just how many people are still just trying to figure out what's ChatGPT, what's Claude, what are the different models,
Mm.
what can they do. So what I'm going to be showing today is more advanced things around workflows and agents to again just show what really is possible. And but yeah, the things that you can achieve with it are really phenomenal already. And so there's a lot of untapped potential that I mean we work with small and medium businesses, so trying to educate and make it clear what can be done today with all the different tools.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to see this. This one area that I haven't really jumped into a lot myself is the automation side. So, I've been using
Mhm.
the tools and copy and pasting, and then I'm
Right.
excited to see how these now can automate the process. And I know you have a lot to present, so I'm going to give you some extra time and pass
Sure.
over the baton to you and let you
Okay.
go off. And I think, yeah, I'm excited to see what you do, and I'll jump in at the end, and we'll get the
Okay.
questions that we get from the audience. So thank you, Sebastian. I'll pass it over to you.
All right, so we're going over different workflows today. So who am I? So Rob already did a good introduction. And then just to fill in the gaps, our company, Fountain City, we help small, medium-sized businesses with not only digital marketing, but also with AI solutions, whether those are related to digital marketing, but also operational automations that you might want to have built for your company. And we're a team, not all our photos are here. We're about 12 to 15 people or so, and we're spread across the US and a little bit also of Canada and Central Southern America. We're mainly in the Americas. There's a lot of slides to show, so I'm going to try and be efficient, effective, and go through these without spending too much time. But basically, we're in a phase right now still where there's just a tremendous amount of tools and options out there. It's very similar to when the car was first invented in the 1900s. There was apparently more than 3,000 car companies out there. Of course, nowadays there's so few. But we're in that explosive time right now where not only do we have different AI models, but on top of all these different models, there's lots of different AI tools that are built upon them. So it can make it hard, as I was explaining a little bit before we started, to even know where you should invest and what tools you should be using. So how to implement AI, I like to think of things a lot in terms of problems and opportunities. Of course, problems are actually just opportunities in disguise. So I'm an optimist, I would say overall. Problems are usually easier to spot what you need to do there more is more of a mindset shift to try and figure out how to solve those problems. And opportunities, though, which would be, you don't have a problem, but you're trying to get maybe a competitive advantage. Those can be harder to spot. So you kind of need to do education, which is part of attending these workshops. I certainly learned something cool and new from Andrew. So, being in these kind of workshops, you can also see new opportunities to lead the way and get that competitive advantage. So when you're looking to apply AI, there are clear win areas on the left here, talking about that, right? I just talked about that. And then in general, anything that's innovative tends to create opportunities for faster, better, cheaper. But within those three, I would say the one where AI can fail unless you really work with it and know how to, it's a lot of the prompt engineering, but also these workflow buildings, getting it to be better than a human is where the effort needs to be put in most of the time. The faster and cheaper is the easy part, I would say. Things keep changing, but right now that's the hardest of the three. And when we work with clients, and if you work with if you're working on your own business and your own solutions, we use a very ROI type approach. So we try and make sure that whatever you're investing into these systems is going to either reduce costs or create an opportunity that has a value, and then try and calculate that value. We love the 6-month benchmark. Anything that's under 6 months ROI is almost always a given. It's going to ROI faster than the market's going to change. If it's between 6 months to 2 years ROI, that's when it's in the gray zone. And then over 2 years, probably too much of an investment. That would be our rule of thumb. Of course, it can change per business. All right, so this slide just shows a thought process around, so when we talk with people, sometimes they have clear needs of what they want to have done in AI. Sometimes they have different competing thoughts and ideas. Sometimes they're just trying to explore. If you want to explore on your own, I think the other speakers talked a lot about that. Here I'm talking about if you wanted to have a project implemented, and so if you wanted to explore and you didn't quite know how to implement it for your business, we or someone else could come in and try and help do some consulting or some discovery work to see where the opportunities are. But if you already know what you want at the top end row there, the light green, then in that case, maybe you already know what your clear value ROI is. You can just issue an RFP. But if you don't, then there could be a discovery first to make sure that there's going to be a clear ROI from that implementation. And you can ask a company for a proposal, unless you're doing it yourself, of course, but this is assuming you're not. This slide has a lot of information on it. So, if you feel free to look at this more later afterwards, I'm not going to go over the whole thing. The main thing I want to talk about here is just in terms of how we're using AI. At the very top in blue, that's where you're typing in prompts yourself into an AI and you're manually getting a response and you're using that response to do work. For example, write me an email and you give it a bunch of information, maybe even upload some examples into it, and then it'll write the email. SaaS level is one below where it's also easy because you just get a SaaS tool. There's lots out there that do lots of AI SaaS tools that will do specific things for you or your organization. They can be great, but they do have limitations of the SaaS. We don't know yet which ones are going to stay around. I think there's at least 7 or 9 the last time I looked, AI tools just for meeting notes, for example. Is there going to be 7 or 9 AI tools for meeting notes 2 years from now? We don't know yet. So there's risk in there to a degree. And then you also don't control the platforms. You can't make changes. You don't control how they're going to develop. And also data, you have to reshare, remanage, and then you have all the privacy concerns of governance and ownership with SaaS. The next bottom 3 are those green ones here in the slide deck. And that's what I'm mainly going to be focusing on today. And those are using AI agents in 3 different ways. So going from most creative interpretation of what needs to be done down to the most strict adherence. So when it's a workflow, you'll see in the later slides, there's an actual sequence that the AI goes through, a chain of thought, or it's like a flow chart. And you have a lot of control of how it's going to move through that flow. If you're using tools, which is that middle row here, going from the bottom up, then you're giving the AI some creativity to pick what tool it wants, but that tool itself can be very prescriptive. And then if you're using MCP, which is a brand new thing that's, I don't know how new it is, but it's new in terms of the hype and adoption. I think it was developed by Anthropic. This is, I think it stands for Model Control Protocol, something like that. And it's basically a language interface that AI can use to talk to other AI systems. And so there the AI, you don't even have to tell it all the options. It can just talk to the other AI system. It responds back with what's possible. And then that first AI then uses tools that it discovers from the other AI So I'll be showing that as well today. And then the last one, which I'm not showing today, is of course you can do all of this writing your own code, which of course gives you a lot of control over what you're doing. And there's ways to use AI to code quickly, or quicker, I should say. And there's concerns about, there's a whole presentation to be done on software coding with AI, but I'm not going to cover that today. So you can always talk to me outside of this if you want to know more about that. Okay, so there are lots of different tools for workflow automations that you could be using. I know not all of these. I think I know about half of the ones on the left there, but there are some other ones out there. I'm going to, and then there's agent platforms, but what I'm really going to be focusing on today, so that there's a focus on the presentation, is Naten, spelled N8N, with this little logo in here. Of course, you can use these and other ones. Make.com just released AI agents with MCP on the platform, I think less than a month ago. So they're catching up. But Naten's really great, and it does everything that we need it to do. And it can also be installed privately. So it can become PCI compliant, HIPAA compliant, and so forth. And it's free if you install it on your own platform. So there's a lot of reasons to really like Naten. And it's open source, if I didn't say that. Okay, so in terms of workflow automations, I'm going to be showing today 4 of them. And if I have time, I have some other things I could also show. So the first one is lead enrichment. Why would we want to be doing lead enrichment? So enriching leads is you're getting a contact. Maybe it's from your forms that are coming in. Maybe you have leads coming in from a different source, wherever that lead is coming in, but you want to have more information about that lead. Or maybe it's someone just writing an email to you saying they want your service, and you want to know a little bit more about them before you talk back to them. So doing an automation here can help save you time. It can make you better prepared. You could use the AI to do research that you never even thought you had the time to do before. So it can, in that case, it's just creating an opportunity. And it can also help you pre-qualify leads as well if you have too many leads coming in. So the steps we're going to go over is you're going to research that business, find the client contact owner of the business in that first situation. If you don't need to know that because you already know the person, you can skip that, and then you're just researching that person, and then you're going to store the results somewhere. So you're getting a new lead coming in here from, here I have 2 different CRMs, Active Campaign, HubSpot, but you could be getting a lead from your website. I put WordPress here, but any website, or it could be from a spreadsheet. You're going to do some research, which is these middle steps. And I have here the logos of Make and Naten. There's some AI. And then Perplexity is what I'm using for that research. But there are other models that are starting to let you do also that online research. And then you're going to enrich that data and store it back in the CRM or in the spreadsheet, wherever it is you want to store it. So here in this example, we have 2 different company domains that come in, and these are the different columns of data that we want to collect. We want to know the LinkedIn URL of that company, a description, their industry, how many employees founded, and so forth. Whatever you want to know. If you wanted to know other things about here, you could add them. But for this example, this is what we're having as our input parameter. And so this is a screenshot of, so to do this presentation and to show all these different things, I just took screenshots of these Naten configurations. So that'll let me do more in less time in terms of showing these different automations. So here in this example, we have a Google Sheet that's pulled in. We're going to ask Perplexity some questions about the data that we want, some research. And then we're going to use a second AI. In this case, we're using Gemini because it's free to use at a certain tier. So it's very cost effective. And we're going to use this, that might change in the future, but right now it's still free. We're going to use this AI to assess the results of the research. And we're going to structure it very strictly into the output that we want to store it back into the Google Sheet. And what we end up with in this example is their LinkedIn URL, the industry, the employees, so forth. It's all pulled in. There can be some errors in here, so you still need a human to double check these things. But I've double checked this, and it's pretty close. It's pretty accurate. So now, once you have that person's name, or maybe you started with that person's name, you can also take that person. In this case, we're going to take the CEO of these 2 companies, and we're going to do research on those people, and we're going to do a separate research on the LinkedIn. The reason I separated it out is I found through testing that it's more efficient, you're going to get more accurate hit of finding the person's LinkedIn URL if you do a separate query just for this. And then again, we're going to have this third AI here is going to reflect upon all of that information and then parse it, structure it, and then store it into a Google Sheet. And so here we can get back from this person all the questions we asked, which was, what's their professional overview, accomplishments, what else have they done, what's their education, personal information. Inside other notes, it even stores things that might be on the internet, which is their hobbies and interests are also stored in here. So it's can be pretty great. And then from this, you could either use this to build emails, but you could also use this to just help you to talk to the person and immediately ask them more interesting and valuable questions. Because in my experience, the best way to start a conversation is to ask really good questions, right? It's even more important than, this is going off topic, but even more important than knowing something about someone is knowing what questions to ask that person, because that's how you really create engagement. So here is an example. Now let's forget the spreadsheet. Let's talk about a CRM. So inside of HubSpot, you can have your email address that you know for that person. So again, you've received the email, maybe they filled out a form. Sales Hub will give you this information, but you have to pay for it. But if you build these example workflows, I'll show you in the next slide, this workflow, you can actually populate all this information just using AI. And hint, it's cheaper than paying for the $90 per seat. If you have 5 seats, that's quite a lot of money. So here's the automation workflow. You have the HubSpot contact. It's very similar. This HTTP request is also Perplexity. I just didn't rename the name of it. And we assess and then restore back into HubSpot. Okay, that was the first one. I'm checking my time here. I'm still good. All right, so email sorting is the next one. So why would you want to sort emails? This is just an example of how you can be using EAs, but in this case, we're doing a virtual front desk. I'm showing this example where you have, let's say, a contact inbox for the business and a general contact inbox, and it's getting way too many emails. Maybe the office manager is overloaded. Your office manager may not want to have to deal with all the emails. Maybe they want to be doing other more interesting, exciting things like building workflows. Our office manager is super into that. But you also want maybe a faster way to react to important emails, and maybe also a front desk that can respond 24/7 as opposed to just during certain office hours. The first thing we want to do is review the emails in the inbox and understand what their intent is. So we're going to use AI to figure out what it is that person is looking for or wants to know. Then we're going to sort them into different categories. We're going to do an auto reply and labeling. And then I'll show also how you can trigger, or that I'll show that you can trigger actions based on those action types that are identified. And I'll start going into some MCP workflow stuff here as well, because this example is really good to kind of show how that works. So if we're using a workflow, then the first thing that I would do or encourage you to do when you're trying to automate something like this is to just draw it out as a series of a flow chart, basically, and show, you've got a new email coming in. You're going to have to figure out the intent and then figure out your categories. We actually have another category in here, which is unknown, which is the catch-all. But these are the matched categories. In this case, we've identified these 5 types of intents. Your business might have different intents, more intents, but this is the example we're doing. If it's a sales request, we get a lot, we get fake scam requests for sales all the time for years. It's only getting worse. So, we want to use AI to figure that out. And we can give the AI tons of examples of what typical scammer patterns are. So, and then every time you find a new scam, you can add it to the AI database. So it makes it even easier to match similar attempts at scamming you or your coworkers. But if someone's offering, in this case, us to do a podcast speaking event, then that we check if it's solicitation, because sometimes it's not, it's more of a solicitation attempt. And then we also get just pure solicitation, job application, support requests. So I'm not going to go over, you can read the slide, there's all the different things. And then in the end, we have these labelings and auto responses based on these possible outcomes. So this giant picture here is just showing what I just showed as a flow diagram, but now built out in Naten as a series of actions that are taken. And wherever we see these scales, this is AI that's making a decision, and they're called sentiment analysis is the term in Naten, because we're using AI to assess, in this case, the email that comes in, categorizing it. And so there's a lot of prompting in here, which I'm not going to show for time's sake, but that prompting helps the AI to understand how it should organize the emails. If it's a podcast, then we're going to try and detect if it's a reel or if it's some kind of solicitation request for a podcast or speaking event. And the same for sales. Is it a real sales call or an email, sorry, or is it a scam sales? And then depending on that, we categorize it. And same for support. So we can take that further And we can also, I've added these little teal topaz blocks as well. We can actually do actions on this too. So if someone requests information, we could reply back with information related to what the person's asking for automatically. If we're getting a sales request, we can send a message to someone on our team about that coming in because it's important. If it's a sales request, we want to respond as quickly as possible. We can also connect to our project management tool and create a task and assign it to that person automatically using AI. And if you are using a CRM, if you're using a CRM like HubSpot or ActiveCampaign, you can also just through the AI can actually create a deal and a contact in your CRM and assign it to that person. So whether it's project management tools, CRM, or both. And then the same with support requests. If it's a high support request, we want to be working on it as fast as possible. So we might want to actually text someone's phone that so-and-so automation or website or whatever is having an issue and we need to look at it right away. So this example here is still using workflows because you're strictly adhering the flow chart. So workflow equals flow chart. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about a tool or MCP approach. So using this approach, you abstract it more. So we have an email that comes in, the AI agent will review it and try and make a decision about what it needs to do with that email. And then all you do is you give it options of what it can do. It can add a label, it could reply to the email, it could forward it to someone. Those are all Gmail type actions. It also, we give it the option to send messages to our phones or Discord or Slack. We give it options to look up and add records into our CRM system, or also add, let's say, tickets to our project management system or tickets to our bug tracking system, whatever your system is. That's more of a tool approach, this first row. And if you want to do MCP, you abstract it even further. You just say to the agent, hey, you have Gmail. Figure out what you can do with Gmail. You can do lots in Gmail. You can reply, you can label, you can forward, you can do even more things. Here's Gmail. You've got access, do whatever you want with it. Here's communication tools. Here's our CRM system. Here's our project management system. Here's all the things you can do in project management system. And then the agent will try and decide what it wants to do with that. So this MCP layer gives the agent a lot more flexibility, but you also are less sure that it's going to do exactly the thing you want. So it's not always the perfect way, the best way to be using it. But I will say as agents become smarter and smarter, we're probably going to be seeing that we're moving towards MCP type interactions or whatever the next acronym is if MCP gets usurped by something else, but this is probably the future. However, I think there's always still going to be a place for these strict controlled workflows as well. So this next slide, I just wanted to show what an MCP server looks like. You can create them yourself. Again, in Naton is pretty, the more I use Naton, the more I just like it. So there's a little bias there for me right now today. But in Naton, you can also create your own MCP servers. It's free. It's within the whole subscription or part of that open source. And it gives you a URL you can call. And so the MCP server, as you can see here, is just a bunch of tools or actions. So reply to email, delete email, get email, search, whatever it might be. And they're all connected to the tool. And then this tool itself is more of a center point that aggregates all of these tools into one place that the AI can then talk to and communicate with. And the AI will self-discover what these tools are and how they work. So if we take that prior example with the email sorting and we look at how that might look like as an MCP agent, we have in this case, it's a webhook, but whatever the chat that's coming in through this flow, it arrives at the agent and the agent has different tools at the bottom. So here, this little green arrow is pointing at the Gmail tool. So that whole thing we saw on this slide, this MCP server, is abstracted just into this one little bubble. So it calls that bubble whenever it wants to send or interact with emails. And then, right now this agent is using Google Gemini for its thought process. That's the LLM you're working with. It has in this case, just a basic memory buffer, but that's what that is. So it knows your chat history. But you can see here that we can also have tools for Slack or whatever your chat system is. You can have a tool for HubSpot or whatever your CRM is, and a tool for your project management tool. We use ClickUp, that could be Asana, Jira, whatever your project management tool is. And then it responds back to your chat message with either questions or I did the job. So in that first example, I showed the lead enrichment and hint, you can actually connect these two together. So if you build that whole email sorting interface and people come in and it's a sales opportunity and you're creating the deal in the CRM can also enrich the lead as it stores it in. Now that if you have both of those built, you can then start. So the more tools you have and the more AI agents you have, there's a compounding exponential effect because you start being able to stack systems together with more systems. And if you want, you could also take that lead enrichment and just add it to that agent that was doing all these other things can also be given access to that lead enrichment that we did on those first slides. And how that looks like is you just add another bubble. And that whole bubble is that whole first example that I showed in the first, one of the first 4 of the 4 workflows that I'm showing today. Okay, so this third example is internal knowledge base. And so this comes up a lot right now, and I think for good reason. There's a lot of value in this. So this is building an agent within your organization that knows everything you want it to know about your organization. So it could be all of your standard operating processes, but it could be past project information, could be client information, whatever you, HR documents, HR policies, whatever you want to be putting into this. You can create an AI internally within your company for your company that can answer questions about whatever. So you could have a project manager ask project management questions. You could have anyone from the team ask about what holidays your company pays or doesn't pay, or your vacation policies, whatever it might be. And so this also gives you the ability to start building local tools and local actions that your AI agent within your company can do. I'll be showing some of those examples as well. And it also can lead into, we have another, the 4th part of this presentation talks about tone of voice. And if you have your own internal agent, you could be having the same business communication voice for all your communications for your entire team, all from one agent, right? So it's kind of taking these external tools that we're using and we're copy pasting stuff in between them and creating something that's for the organization itself. Just scanning this in case I have any other bullets I want to talk about. The owning your own data and your own systems. So there's different degrees of ownership. You could be having your own AI, but the AI calls are still going out onto the internet. So you do have to be aware of privacy and security and governance if you're going to be doing that. But you do have the option to also install a local language model, one of the open source ones, and privately contain it. And then you won't be going to the internet at all, and you can have your own AI agent that keeps all your data secure for your team. So that is also an option. The other advantage of building your own internal agent that I'm going to show is that you own your data. You're not giving it to anyone else. You can do as much privacy security on that system as you want, but also you can keep expanding new business features and functionality over time as you need them, and you can keep compounding value. There are, in my opinion, big advantages to doing this versus installing lots of different SaaS software solutions, because those tools may not talk together. Some of them might overlap with features. Some of them might disappear. And also, if you're building your own systems, you can make them do whatever you want to be doing. And a lot of AI tools right now are actually not doing things that are that complicated to do, honestly, in my opinion. And a lot of making sure that these tools and systems are working well is error handling, robustness, fault control, but also hallucinations and risk control. So you do need to be aware of those things. It's not trivial, but the actual operation of taking the workflows themselves can be built pretty easily. They're not overly complicated so doing your internal knowledge agent, what I'm trying to say, is not something that's impossible. It's actually very tangible. Okay, so in terms of the steps, we're going to be asking the knowledge base some kind of a question. So it gives us an internal help desk, and then we're going to access knowledge back from that. But we can also use this internal agent to execute operations that we've connected to it through those prior slides show a little bit of those ideas of having tools and actions that you can activate. So here, I like to start again with a flow chart. So this is just showing the same thing, but in visual terms. So we have our process questions, HR actions. The AI is going to determine the intent of what you're trying to do. If you're looking up knowledge, it's going to look up the question in its knowledge base and come back with an answer. If it might need to read or access a tool, depending on what you're asking it to do. And then once it's read a tool, then it might perform a command or an action that you've given it access or an ability to do. So here's an example of our internal tool. So we have a chat interface internally within our intranet, and we can ask it things, for example, hi there, where do I post if I'm sick today? And it comes back and it's accessing our internal knowledge base. It gives a link to that Discord. We use Discord internally for chatting. So it gives a link to the channel so you can click it and tells you, you should tag here if you're going to be sick. And then we've also added a little added value because we want the AI, when it replies, to always tell you the source of that knowledge, so that you can always click it to review the document yourself, so that you see where where it's pulling the knowledge from. Internally, we want to be able to do this also so that we can maybe even update that document. You can see here we're using Google Drive, but it could be any system that you want to be using. Another example down here, if we use project management tool, we use ClickUp, and we have different status types in there. So there's open, in progress, and so forth. Let's say that you were having some questions about why you should change the status to in review. Again, it looks up a document and says, this is our internal process for why it should be put into review. And again, the source. But it can be doing much more complicated type of answers, or larger things can come back. So here's an example of a technical question being asked about what onboarding steps this admin should do for a new client. And it tells that our developer, in this case, the things that they should be checking on that client's site before doing a full take-in of the site. We don't want to take on a new client who has viruses in their software. So this is kind of like a checklist. And again, this text was too long to show you the entire thing, but it keeps going down. And then eventually you can also put there links to templates, links to, when I say template, a ClickUp template that you could use to spin up this actual activity and then go through the checklist there where you check things off. Now, so you're using a chat voice interface, the logic, and then we're using for that knowledge. In this example, I'm using Pinecone. Pinecone, I would say, so it's a vector database, and you'll hear the term sometimes RAG. And essentially what you're doing is you're giving a bunch of knowledge that is accessible to an AI, and the AI can look up information in that database so that it can give the right contextual answer for what the person is asking. Pinecone I quite like for simple starting type projects, or when you're just trying to establish value, because Pinecone has a pretty reasonable free tier that you will not exhaust if you're just doing testing and trialing. And if you really are going to be using the vector database for the knowledge store at the level where you start needing to pay, then you've most likely determined that it has value. And then at that point, you can choose to either stay with Pinecone or move to a different platform, or even self-host your own vector database. But Pinecone is nice because it's how easy it is to use. In 5 minutes, you can have a vector database set up. So here is just the insides of how this little agent, our Fountain City agent, is working. So that webhook is pulling the chat interface from our website. This looks very similar to the other slides that I was showing, but here's some tools at the bottom. So we can search the Google Drive for things. We can ask it to create a blog post, but this Ask Knowledge was the main one that I was showing all those things from. But we also have some actions here. I'm just showing one action in this demo that on this far right, where it says bottom right, where it says clean up active campaign. And so I'm going to show that, I think, nope, it's not the next slide. So it's coming a little later. So this next slide here, this is showing what is going on when we're asking knowledge to the database. So we look up the information in Pinecone, and then the information that comes back is aggregated. And then we have another AI that looks at all of the documents that were pulled up and makes a determination of which document relates to the question that's being asked. And then it combines all that meta information that's come back from Pinecone as well into a response. This combine is how we get things like the source of the file that's displayed in the chat. So here's an example of an action that I was giving a prelude to. So if you wanted to say, so you can assign any kind of tool or action as well to this AI. And then if you prompt it to use the tool, it'll go off and do the thing. So one of the things that we found we were doing a lot, and hint, our developers aren't really good at cleaning up their test data. So what we added an automation, which is just these sequence of bubble boxes here that are connected together, that performs certain steps to go into in our case, we have an active campaign for our lead capture. And when we want to clean up the test data, we can just ask the AI to do it. And it goes through the dozens or multiple dozens of test records in there. And in our case, we just want to clean up anything that has a domain Fountain City on it. We have 2 aliases. So there's 2 pathways, it has to be done twice. And then it also deletes all the test deals that were created from the automation. And it's done in, I don't know, 5 seconds or 10 seconds. It's incredibly fast. Instead, manually, it would take 30 minutes or an hour. It's just annoying. So probably not an hour, but at least 30 minutes each time. So in terms of the knowledge base itself inside of Pinecone, so to refresh the knowledge, we have a refresh step here at the top. I just overlapped these icons so I could kind of squish it all together, but these are all just properties of this pinecone cleanup operation, which is an AI process. And then we have for the actual knowledge itself, we're going to be, in this case, we have a designated location in our Google Drive. That is where we put all of our knowledge base. And what the AI does is this little loop here is it opens up each folder. If it's not a folder, and then we check for any Google Docs, and we've made our life simple by making sure there are only Google Docs in there. Every time it finds a Google Doc, it grabs the field and then upsets it, which is the term for store in the database, basically. It adds it to the Pinecone database as a knowledge source. But if it finds a folder, it'll loop around, it'll set a new target for that subfolder, and then it'll scrape all the documents from that folder. And any folders it finds again in the subfolder, it'll loop around again. So this way we can have a tree of documents so that humans have a better view of how they're organized, and the whole system can just loop through and iterate and grab all the documents and add them to the Pinecone database. On the left here, I have a little clock here because you can either execute this on a command. You could, if you want to only refresh it when you want, but you could also have it refresh on a clock basis. It could be every day or every day at 2 a.m. or something when no one's around. It could just go through and update the database, for example, with any new knowledge changes from the last day. So for tone of voice enrichment, this is the last of the main automations. We'll see if we have time for any extras. So for tone enrichment, why would you want to be doing this? So we saw in Andrew's presentation that I really liked how he was using cursor there in that presentation, and he had some documents in there for tone of voice. So imagine though that you want your entire company to have access to the same tone of voice. This will allow different people in your organization to have self-similar content. It will also allow AI systems to create content that's more similar to your tone of voice more quickly, so you don't have to do as much editing on the text. And it also allows people in your organization who aren't normally writers to be doing more output that is even just production ready. So for example, maybe your marketing person isn't as comfortable as a copywriter, but they want to create some emails. You could have those emails in the right tone of voice without them needing to send them to a copywriter first and then back. And then the copywriter can be spending more time thinking about the content that needs to be written, and then taking the content that comes out of the AI and really adding in the magic touch, or de-AIing the output with their novelty, or there's lots of discussion around getting copywriters to integrate these processes in. Again, I'm not a proponent of saying, for us, AI is really an enhancement of someone's role rather than a replacement. So our goal is to make our copywriters, in our case, to have even more tools and more options at their disposal, so that the writing they can do more writing that's better and faster, right? Those faster, better, cheaper. Okay, so we talked about the why. So in terms of the steps, so first, obviously you need to know what your tone of voice and communication guidelines are. If your business already has this, amazing. You're ahead of definitely ahead of a lot of small businesses. Most medium should have this. And if you don't, definitely work on that. I'll briefly talk about that. And then we want to organize that information in a way that's friendly for the AI to understand. So that's the second step. And then we're going to use it to do tone enhancement. And then I'm going to show here a self-reflection step. So you can then also use AI to make sure that a second AI agent can check that the first AI agent did a good enough job enhancing the tone of voice. I've found that if you add that second check, you get much better outputs. And if the second AI agent thinks that the first one didn't do a good job, it'll write notes for that AI agent to tell it how it should improve it, and then send it back to the first AI agent to try again. And you can have that loop happen a few times. And if it fails after the third attempt, or however many attempts you want, you can have an error out and then log that error so that a human can look and see what happened and what went wrong. And assuming it goes correctly, though, you're going to save it or store it or return the output to the person who's requesting that tone of voice enhancement. So to get your tone of voice, these are examples of documents that you could be storing. So in our case, we have, in this example here, a brand identity. Who is this brand? What is your brand? Who are your customers? What are the main services you offer? And also maybe you could have even sub options of services if you do a lot. Then we have lots of guidelines then after that are more specific to certain types of output. So we have our general tone of voice, which is that last one here in the list. But then we have specific guidelines written for social media, or blog post articles are a little different. And then newsletter is also a little different. I would say you can start with just a general one, but then as you use this, if you're going to be using this, you will notice or realize that you need a different guideline, let's say for LinkedIn, which is shorter format, different kind of content than you would need for a blog post. So you're going to want to craft those different guidelines for different types of mediums as well. So general guideline with tone of voice is you don't want to put your tone of voice at the beginning. You actually want to do it towards the end. So you want to start with your concept, then so what are you writing about at all? Like why are you even writing something? And then how are you going to structure it? What are your headers, subheaders? What content do you want to have in it? Part of the concept should be the goal, right? What is it you want the person to learn or understand from what you're writing? And then you write the actual content. There might be a sub part of it with research that could come before or after the content is written. And once you have all of that together, then you want to do a tone of voice pass on that. So you don't really care too much about the tone of voice before, but at this point you want to polish the tone of voice to get it as close as you can to your brand voice. Or let's say your voice of someone in your organization. We work with clients where everything needs to sound very much like that client's voice that they have. They have a very specific way of writing. So you'd be matching it to that person's writing. And then you have the polish step, so it goes back to human after that to make sure that nothing's wrong, that the voice is indeed there, and check that it did a good job. So within the tone of voice, we're going to break that open a little bit. We're going to draft the tone of voice. We have the draft that comes in, sorry. Then we're going to load our company documents, which is our tone of voice documents. We're going to apply the change. We're going to assess if it did a good job. And if it did, we're going to save it. So now that we have those steps drawn out, we can look at this tool that exists here in this little teal arrow at the bottom. So again, this is a tool attached to the AI agent. And this is a lot of what's going on here. But basically in this flow, the tool begins here at the top left. So this is all within that bubble. So first it says skip, but that I just need to rename that. It's actually loading the document that we're going to be editing. Tone of voice 1 is the general tone of voice. And then tone of voice blog is the tone of voice specific for a blog. In this case, we're running a blog tone of voice enhancement. And we're going to store some fields together. So we have everything aggregated. This is important because of the loop, which I'll get to later. But then we're going to have an agent here. We like using Claude a lot for writing. We find it's really good at doing writing itself. So different LLMs are good at different things. So we have Claude in this case is doing the writing, and it's structuring its outputs because we want to make sure that we're not getting, sometimes when you talk to an AI, you'll get back kind of preamble and postamble around the text, but we want to make sure that the AI is responding with just the content and it doesn't say, oh, sure, I'll do that job. Here's what I wrote. And then at the end, tell me what you think. Should I keep working on it? Like, we don't want all of that pre and post fluff. So by using this output fixer, we kind of make sure that it's strictly coherent. Here's where we do an output check if there's too many. Oh, we have it twice in here. This one, I think this is a relic, this one here. I just didn't notice it before I started the presentation today. This one will almost never, this one doesn't really fail. So let's skip that. So it comes through here and we have the tone of voice quality check here. This is the agent that checks. We are using a more advanced model here because we're taking now the tone of voice documents plus the output from the first agent, and we're asking it to do a deep assessment of the output and come back and say, what should be improved, did it do a good job? And ultimately, we ask it to rank the response with a percentage score. Then we look at the sentiment. This one's much simpler. This is a cheap AI model. Actually, it's a free AI model. And it just looks at the quality check and makes an assessment. Did this reach the minimum percentage of quality we're looking for? And if it didn't, then it sends it back through the loop and it stores in this where it says edit fields 1, it stores the information that the first AI needs to write again, plus any of the feedback it got. And if it fails too many times, then we record that. So here is an example of a tone of voice that is very dramatic, hyperbolic. It uses EM dashes, lots of buzzwords. And this is what the text might look like before you throw it into the system. And then here is after tone of voice. You can read this offline if you want, but here's a tone of voice that is supposed, hopefully sounds more collaborative because that's the goal, and it incorporates methodical phrasing. So these are elements from the business communication strategy, but it also adds in some humility and for the confidence. It's not over the top, but we also have it prune out things that we don't want to be in there to make it sound less like AI. So we remove in this case EM dashes, but also common catchphrases like, in today's fast-paced world. I'm sure some of you have heard that somewhere before. So, you can use these tone of voice to prune all of that stuff away. Okay, so we have a few finishing slides before we get to the bonus stuff, but if I don't have time for the bonus stuff, that's totally fine. Um, I like having kitchen sinks in my presentation, so I have a few extra slides if we wanted to go into it. But in terms of implementation steps, so if you want to implement one of these things, it's kind of a recap from the beginning. So, first, what are your goals, but also what are your risks? This is really important. We also build AI chatbots for clients, and so what are the things you don't want the bot to be doing, and really identify what all of those are. If you have contract agreements, make sure that all those elements from the contract where you're saying already in those contracts, if you have legal agreements, you probably already have been thinking about your liability risks and so forth. Make sure all of those things are brought in as you're establishing your project with AI, and then drive them all into your requirements. And then next step is planning. What are you going to be doing? Documenting. And this data prep step is where the data solution part here. This is where, in some cases, if not a lot of cases, most of the work actually happens. So a lot of data, the data that you just have that's raw will need to be categorized, organized, but it might need meta description. And then sometimes data is written in a way where it just assumes that the human understands the context. But when you're pulling things into AI, you have to be a lot more explicit. I think of it as teaching. I think one of the other presenters today, I forget who, talked about handling AI as if it's your intern. And so I really like that analogy, because when we write instructions for the AI, we write the instructions as if we're talking to someone who's never been on the job before and they first arrived. And so when you're taking data and you're getting it ready, like your operating procedures for your business, let's say you want to do that internal knowledge system, you need to look at how that information is written in a way where anybody could read the information who's not qualified for that job, right? Like, try and make it as simple as possible so that when the AI reads it, it really understands the context of everything. Once you have that, you can create your build, do a first release, and then there's kind of a double training aspect. There's not only training the AI, so you're checking against your risks and requirements and goals in the beginning that it's doing what you expect or not doing what you don't want it to do. Then there's also the people training part of it, of course. And then you go into refinement and iterations over time to either adapt it, grow it, or just stay current with the market as things are changing. Things to consider as a business. So I talked a little bit in the beginning about the ROI. Are you getting competitive advantage? But how are you going to maintain and iterate improvements on the system? It's not just with AI projects. We've seen this also with website projects. There can be sometimes a lack of thought into this, but it's really important. You don't want to create a system that then you can't maintain later. Do you need to have security, and what kind of security do you need? I show here on the right that you can create an AI bubble in your organization so that you can create a system that's PCI, PII compliant, HIPAA compliant. If you want to be using identifiable information of your clients or yourself, you might want to really consider this. Or if you want to be talking about trade secrets and you really don't want them to leave, you can create your own ecosystem that has a local AI agent. You can, Nathan works in that environment as well. So I put that little icon in here, and you can bubble yourself out. So is that important to you? If it is, there is a cost to that. It's not, this is when it can become more expensive. So, but it might absolutely be worth it. And if you're a medium-sized business, I would say it's definitely in the realm of possibility for you. And then in terms of governance, privacy, that I already talked about that. And then data ownership, again, the advantage of if you need to own your data, then you're going to want to keep it locally instead of just passing it to lots of these external SaaS companies or external AI tools. In terms of implementing, we don't have time to go over all of these, and I think I'm very close to my end of time. I think there's only one more slide after this. So in terms of implementation consideration, you need to be thinking about how to handle errors. What kind of reports do you want to be having of the AI system itself? Those reports could be how many times it failed, but it could be how many times the person who's interacting with the AI had a positive or negative experience. You can be tracking those kinds of things. What do you need to report on? Do you want to, and then this workflow NCP tool driven, that's kind of a thought process around what is the most suitable way of building the AI workflow automation that fits your business. Do you want to be including self-reflection loops within the AI process? What kind of quality, oh, sorry, I wrote self-reflection twice. What kind of quality controls do you want to be having within the process itself? And the self-reflection within this is, when you have a quality issue, do you want the AI to self-improve itself? Or do you want a human to look at that output and make a decision about how the quality should be improved? Do you need long-term memory? What kind of memory do you need to have stored? AI models right now are still not really built for long-term memory, but you can add long-term memory capabilities yourself. Are you going to be using different models that talk to each other and having sequences of AIs together? Think about model optimization. Not all models cost the same. So you want to match different models with their price point with what you actually need. And then how are you going to be doing testing? We've been doing testing where we use AI to test AI. So we can create giant spreadsheets with lots of different test cases. Those spreadsheets are also created by AI. And then those AI tests are then mass tested against the AI to see where we can break it. You can do sequence tests and so forth. So how are you going to be testing the AI to make sure, especially if it's, I mean, internal, there's risks, but if it's an external tool, there's even more risk. And then do you need to integrate with any of the custom systems? So we can help with, so just a little plug for us, we can help you with consulting, workshops, discovery, or the actual implementation and training. And then I think I'm going to end it here because this might be a good place. This is my first endpoint. So this, if you want access to this presentation, I think it'll be sent afterwards, but this is the QR code link to this slide deck. And you can see the extra slides there at the end if you want to. You can also go to our website. We have a newsletter. We're sending right now just one email a month. So pretty low volume. You can follow me on LinkedIn, please do. And then if you want to talk with us, here's a link to a page that's made just for the conference with some extra info and a contact form. So I'd love to talk with you about whatever it is you want to know. So thank you for watching. I'll end my screen share here. Okay.
Awesome. That was a lot. You should take a sip of water, Sebastian. You got a lot in there.
I need another glass of water. Yeah. I got it though.
No, that was awesome. So, and like I said earlier, like this is one area I haven't really, like I haven't jumped into a lot when it comes to the automation. I'm curious, like, when you kind of, I know when there's two models, right? The clients come to you and you're building these automations for clients, and there's clients that want to do some do-it-yourselfers as well. Like how long typically does a build? I would say a typical, I know they're all different, but how long does it typically take to build one of these automations out? If it's, I know even like the workshop you did in Oregon, like, in half hour, we had a pretty cool
Mhm.
automation build. Is that, typical for a simple automation?
Well, there are some very simple automations which could be done from the beginning to the testing and release could be done in a week. But I
Mm,
would say for anything that's kind of serious and chunky, a month is a pretty good beginning time frame
okay.
because it's not just building it, it's also making sure we know what we're building, how we're going to maintain
Right.
it, all those other questions that need to be
Right.
answered up front. We at least want to make sure that we are not painting ourselves or our client into a corner. And so once we kind of do that, that might be like week 1 or 2, depending on how complex it
Right.
is. And then week 2 and 3 in that month time frame might be building it, getting feedback, doing some internal testing. And then week 4, if it's a month project,
Yeah.
would be doing a lot more testing and client acceptance review that it's doing everything that needs to be done. And then, materials, training materials, and so forth. But more advanced things can take more than that if just depends how much needs to be done in that first release. It could be 2 months or 3 months, but I would say a month for the simpler things is a pretty good ballpark.
Interesting. A couple questions in the chat. First one is, how do you prevent the agents from learning things they shouldn't, which could make them go off script?
Yeah, so if the systems that I showed actually don't have, so if you're using self-reflection, then that's definitely consideration. But if you're not using a self-reflection where you allow the AI to update its own documents,
Right.
then the AI is never actually updating its knowledge base to create a compounding effect of bad information. If the question is more about how do you prevent the AI from hallucinating or from
Right.
hitting risks, then the in the best approach to that we found is that you first want to identify what those risks are upfront rather than discover them yourselves. So, if you have a company and you have a warranty program of 30 days and there's terms and conditions, what are those terms and conditions?
Right.
What is the warranty? Make sure the AI knows all of that information and then test it rigorously to make sure that you can't get it to say something incorrect about, in this case, your terms and conditions. So finding out what those risk points are of your knowledge is really important in order to make sure that it's not going to go off rails in some way. And then if it's an internal tool versus external, internal usually has a little more tolerance if you get back an answer that's not quite correct. You'll just tell your coworker, hey, this bot needs to be smarter. But if it's
Yeah.
for external use, you just need even more testing and more rigor in that. And you can use a second AI to check the work of the first, just like you can do with the tone of voice. You
Yeah.
can do for also these kind of topic deviations.
I love how you use AI to keep the other AI in check. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome. Pretty fun. Another
Yeah.
comment, great presentation. Thank you. Automating workflows could greatly improve companies' productivity. Two questions. Number one, do companies need to have their own knowledge base to set up workflows? If not, what resources are available, especially for small businesses without one?
Yeah, so I think what I would do in that case is I would start backwards from the goal. So, what is it the goal that you want to achieve? And then, based on that goal, you can figure out what documentation you might need to create to support that process. You can use AI to create the documentation as well. You definitely want to make sure that you know what you're trying to achieve with that documentation, and you definitely want to make sure that that documentation is accurate and correct about the thing that you're trying to achieve.
Right.
So if it was a return policy, you could talk to your AI about what are some standard AI return policies, and you can just look
Mhm.
at all of them, and then you can cherry pick the things that fit your organization, or whatever it is you're trying to do. And then all of a sudden, I'm using that because I was already talking about that. But
Yeah.
whatever it is that you need to create documentation for, um, you could even do an interview with your coworker to ask them about how they do work in a certain way that you want to make sure the rest of the team knows about. And then you can transcribe that conversation, throw it into an AI, and then ask the AI to create a process document from that,
Right.
check that document, and then store that into the knowledge base, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can use to
Interesting.
create knowledge base information if you don't have it.
Interesting. Okay. The second question, I think we've answered. The first part is just for a small business with fewer than 50 employees, like a local retail store. How long does it typically take to set up a workflow? I think you covered that with my question. But the second part is,
Yeah.
can they customize templates that you provided? So can you actually, like, you have some templates, can you actually take those and customize them?
It's possible, yes. I think the main, I would say it kind of follows the 80-20 rule.
Mm,
So you can use an existing template, or you could use what you've learned today on this call, on this webinar, to get
yeah.
80% there in 20% of your time. But most of the work is in that last 20%. So
Right.
if it's not quite answering your questions correct, or if it sometimes comes back with an error, like how are you handling those situations? But you can get really far really quickly, I would say. And then it's
Okay.
just a question of how much time and energy you want to put into learning these platforms. I showed today Nathan, but like I said, there's other platforms you can use for these agent
Right.
to
Okay.
agent or workflows.
Okay. A comment from Stuart. It says, great presentation, Sebastian. So thank you. So this is
Thanks,
a little bit of
Stuart.
a long one from Adrian, but it's a great question. Without advocating one service over another, how robust are the cloud-based infrastructure services like Azure or AWS that might allow small businesses to implement these solutions, run and host secure local agents, databases, etc., while keeping costs down, not having to invest on, say, on-prem servers and so on?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when we're talking about having a private infrastructure, which I mentioned briefly in the
Yeah.
slides, to create governance of your data, then the question is, well, what does a local infrastructure mean? Because it could be a
Hmm.
cloud infrastructure, right? And so you can definitely do that. And everything in security is all about managing risks and costs. So, because having a cloud infrastructure that is, and you could use an AWS partner to
Right.
really tighten it down, and you could have a double firewall and all this
Right.
stuff to make it super secure, and you have to
Yeah.
VPN into it. But there could still be a risk with the fact that you don't have it on premise. But then on the flip side, if you have it on premise, that still doesn't guarantee that you're at no risk, because what if all your backup storage tapes are stored
Hmm.
in the room next door to your server rack, and there's a fire and the whole building goes down, and then your
Yeah.
whole, and your board thinks to themselves, why didn't we store our backup tapes offsite? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's still risks in any approach you take, and there's the costs involved. If you're going to have on premises, there's a lot more costs usually than a
Fair
cloud-based
enough.
system. So it really just depends on the business and the risks that you're willing to take and the costs you're willing to pay for those risks, or
Interesting.
risk avoidance, I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And last question is, what metrics do you use to measure if the tone of voice changes are actually improving the content?
Yeah, so in that example, we're using the AI reads the tone of voice documents
Yep.
that exist, and then it checks the content that's been written and does an assessment of how close it was at achieving the tone of voice
Mm,
document. And the tone
interesting.
of voice document itself is quite long, and it has within it, and it's long because of the iterations that have gone through to
Right.
progressively improve it by using it, where we see every time we see where it's failing, it's an impetus to further extend it. And by the way, you can use AI to do that as well. You can
Yeah.
say, hey, it failed. How would you recommend improving the tone of voice document further? But yeah, we're using that document to giving it to the AI and then asking it to assess the content against it and then do an assessment valuation when it comes back with recommendations of bullets on how to do further improvement. And then we ask it to also give an overall score, so that we can do a sentiment analysis as well. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think this is where, the real power of AI comes in these tools with some automation. I think that, we talk about all these tools and so forth, but this is the practical part where you can start implementing these solutions, right? Which I get excited about. And
Hmm.
one thing we
Hmm.
talked about with Sebastian that I'll kind of mention is that running some workshops where you guys can actually come in, and Sebastian will lead a workshop where you actually build workflows. So you're going to walk
Hmm.
out with actual workflows. So if that's something that interests you, reach out to us and let us know if there's interest. We'd love to do a virtual workshop where you come in for
Yeah,
half a day, and Sebastian can actually, maybe we'll fly you up here, Sebastian. You need to come visit the Okanagan anyway. So you maybe we'll
I would
fly
be
you up
into that. Yeah, I
there.
love every time I come to Canada. Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're hoping to potentially look at doing something like that where we're actually bringing you up and running a
Okay.
whole half day workshop. So
Awesome.
yeah, if there's
Oh,
interest, people that are on the webinar, if
yeah.
there's interest, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll organize something like that. But Sebastian, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Loved what you have presented. I know you could have went on. I know there's a lot more in this space, and
Oh, it's,
like I
yeah,
said,
I
from
had
the
to cut off
magical part to
somewhere.
you.
So,
It's all
yeah,
good. Well, but thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. And we'll
thank
be
you.
in touch. And if there's, like I said, we already had a yes with a bunch of exclamation marks about we're having a workshop. So maybe
Okay.
we'll circle back and see if we can get that done.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Sebastian.
having me.
No
Take care,
problem. Take
everyone.
care.
Bye.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. It was a quick 4 hours, I thought, actually. It went by fast. I'm hoping you guys got a lot of great tidbits from all the speakers. We got to cover a bunch of topics. I really appreciate everyone that came on today and tuned in and be part of this. Obviously, big thank you to Rochelle, Andrew, Janet, and Sebastian for taking time out of their busy schedules to come and speak with you guys as well. And like I said, we're going to do more of these. We'll do one of these every month leading up to our main summit, our Level Up Summit, September 19th. If you haven't signed up yet, please go online, sign up, and we'll keep you updated when we get all the details. We're thinking of actually, just sneak peek a little bit, we're thinking of extending over maybe a 2-day event where we actually are running workshops and so forth as well. So just fill the information, zero obligation. And remember that we do have our 6-week AI sprint. It's $50 off if you sign up today. We did extend it by a little bit because I said 1 and it's already 1 o'clock. So we extended it for a bit, for an hour, I think. So if you want to sign up for the 6-week sprint, just go on, sign up. You get $50 off. You got to use the code April Summit. Again, thank you guys a lot for joining. I know it's a busy day. It's a Friday, beautiful sunny day. So go enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully you guys had lots of value out of it, and we'll keep you posted on our next one will be, the topic will be women in AI. We already have a couple speakers lined up. We're just trying to find a date. And then we'll be having AI in education and AI in healthcare as well, in the same similar format. So just keep abreast and follow us. You can follow me on LinkedIn and follow our channels to see when those will happen. So again, big thank you to everyone. Thank you guys for showing up today. We'll see you next time, and please